Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm your host, Cheryl Hens. We're going to be talking tonight about a topic that I think is confusing to a great many people. We're going to be looking at gender identification, sexual identification. Promise we're not going to do anything R or X-rated, but people are identifying themselves in different ways these days, and they're using pronouns to identify themselves, and it's something that I want to know more about. I think it's probably presenting a lot of confusion for many people, at least some of the people that I've talked to. They're like, what is this? We're confused. So I am very pleased to be joined tonight by three experts on this. And they're all kind of chuckling because they're like, we're not experts. But I think that these three women are very knowledgeable about this, and they can definitely help us out to understand what's really happening and how we're describing each other and why. So to my right is someone who's, I think this is probably your fourth or fifth time on the show. Mm-hmm. We have Liz Cannon, Dr. Liz Cannon. She is the director of the LGBTQ plus Resource Center on the UW campus. Seated to her right, we have Eliza Farrow. And you have got one of the longest titles I've ever seen.
I'm sorry, it's a university thing.
Yeah, we've abbreviated it because we didn't have enough space there to put this all in. But you are the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Student Service Coordinator for the Women's Center. And this is the Women's Center then on campus?
Yes, at UW Oshkosh.
Okay. Perfect. And then we have TJ Hobbs. Now, TJ has been on the show before, I think just about a month or so ago. Mm-hmm. TJ is one of the several founders of Hope Fridge, but she's also an advocate for this topic, and I think that she knows a lot about this issue as well. So happy to have all three of you here tonight. Thank you so much. So, I think for many years, people have become comfortable now. They're comfortable with terms like gay and lesbian and homosexual, bisexual, but then over the years, other terms sort of crept in, like asexual, transsexual, metrosexual, pansexual, all these things. I have no idea what some of these things are. And then to make matters worse now, as far as understanding things, and that's why we're doing this, to get some clarification, we've got people identifying themselves using pronouns. Mm-hmm. And like behind each of their names tonight, we have the pronouns listed that they identify themselves as, and so when those graphics come up, you'll see them. But like Liz, for example, your pronouns, if I can find it on here, you are A, M, and heirs. So basically what you've done is drop off the TH off of they, and the TH off of them, and the TH off of theirs. And so we're going to hear about that later. And TJ, your pronouns are they, them, theirs. And Eliza, what were your pronouns?
They, them, theirs as well.
Oh, okay. Same thing?
Correct.
Oh, all right. Excellent. Well, that makes it easy. So I guess, let's kind of start with some basics. Your center's website even refers to things somewhere I saw on the website, LGBTQIA+. Mm-hmm. Now, what in the world is that?
Our alphabet soup is what that is. So those identities, some of them you've already mentioned, some of them you already know. So we have lesbian, gay, bisexual. T is for transgender. Q is for queer. Mm-hmm. And then I is for intersex, and A is for asexual. And
okay.
The plus recognizes that there are a lot of identities in our community. It's just one of those actual realities. And so there are other identities that aren't listed.
Yeah. So the plus brings in the other ones that, like the pansexual and the metrosexual, and I don't even know what they are. Now, the T, you said it's for transgender. Mm-hmm. years ago, did it stand for transsexual, or did it never stand for that?
When it was actually put into the acronym, it was always transgender.
Okay.
Transsexual is an older word, and it was actually developed in the medical community.
Mm-hmm.
And it was used to describe folk that the medical community were seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't a term that came from within the community itself. That said, there are still people who use that as their identity term.
Mm-hmm.
And usually people who use transsexual as their identity term, there are somebody who are transgender and are going through gender confirmation, and so are changing their bodies through hormones, through surgery, and so that their bodies reflect not only their sex, which they connect to their gender, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
A little bit.
It does. It's very confusing. It really is. So, this is my naivete about this. So, we've got the letter Q in here for queer, which I still find that so offensive.
I know.
You know,
know.
from the very first time that you and I talked about it, I said, you know, that has always been, at least from when I was growing up, I viewed that as a really, almost like the N-word being used for African Americans.
I know.
And so I was never comfortable, and I still don't think I'm comfortable with that word. But, so, queer means homosexual, right?
No.
Or gay? No, it
No.
doesn't? Okay.
No.
Well, straighten me out.
So,
But only so far, guys.
Queer you up.
Only so far. Help me with this, because I don't understand that at all.
so first remember that queer actually is a word in the English language that means not the norm. That's what the definition of the word is.
Okay.
And because it is a word that has a actual acceptable and wonderful definition within the English language, it is not originated as a slur, and so there is reason to reclaim it.
Okay.
And so when we're talking about the word queer as not the norm, we're talking about the norm is set up as a certain type of identities are considered the norm for sexuality and for gender.
Okay.
And then other identities that aren't the norm are queer.
Okay.
And I think the important thing to remember is that if you're somebody who sees the norm on a hierarchy, like up here and down here, then yeah, you don't want to use the word queer. Because most people who then use it are using it the way you've experienced it, as a slur.
Yeah.
But if you just see them as something equal, and there are more people in this category than this, now we can have this great conversation.
Okay.
If that,
It kind of does make sense. I don't know that, like, the average citizen, probably in my age group or thereabouts, would necessarily understand it that way.
Yep.
And they would probably, because of when they were raised and how they were raised, they would probably just refrain from using
right,
that word.
exactly.
Exactly.
So,
And there are a lot of folks that have trauma around the word queer.
Yes.
And
Really?
I think,
Yes.
yeah, because
Yeah.
it has been used against some of those folks, just
Yeah.
like you've heard it negatively, especially in older generations.
Yeah.
So younger generations, I would say, usually don't have that same association with the word. And also in higher education, it tends to be a word that's been widely known to be reclaimed, and we have classes like queer theory and stuff like that. But I think one thing that's really important throughout this entire conversation is that when we're talking about identity labels, we want to use the identity labels that folks use for themselves. So queer is one that I wouldn't necessarily use for folks unless that is an identity label that they use for themselves, then I would use that back to that person.
okay.
So I think that's, you know, an important thing just to know, like same with transgender and transsexual, right? So if somebody identifies themselves and that's their identity label as transsexual, then I would use that language back to them. But, you know, most of the time I wouldn't use transsexual
Okay.
as a identity label.
Okay. So TJ, you've been nodding your head, so you understand what they're talking about. Tell us a little bit about, you know, your experience, and, you know, where do you lie in this LGBTQIA acronym?
Well, I mean, myself and the word queer have a storied history, and I'll tell you, it was one in which I didn't feel almost like I felt like there was like a queer test I had to pass to like use the term when I first started calling myself that, but at the same time, my entire life growing up, my entire childhood, never felt like I was a woman, never felt like I was a man, always felt like I was a human, and that one day I'd feel these magical feelings everyone around me is feeling, and everyone around me is telling me I'm weird and wrong and odd, queer, you know, for not feeling those feelings. Still haven't felt those feelings, but I finally, in California, when I moved out there, what it was one of a coworker who's even younger than me, like, you know, I think 22, young kid was like, you know, called himself queer as a $3 bill, and I'll never forget it, because hearing that, and he said it, and he was so happy about it, and I'm like, you know, and I knew him, and he had, you know, identified as that way before, but just, that had stuck with me as like a pivotal, you know, you can just call yourself queer and be queer if you feel queer, and it's such a beautiful, to me, word that encompasses, you know, to me, the beauty of it. Folks always say, you know, oh, we don't need or want to know who you're sleeping with, it doesn't matter, blah, 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 which, you know, that's a whole conversation we can have, but the beauty of queer is that it doesn't tell you those things. So if you don't care and you don't want to hear about who's sleeping with who or who likes what, you know, sexuality-wise, queer doesn't tell you that stuff, but it still appreciates the diversity of, you know, gender and sexuality in a way that, you know, essentially covers all the bases and allows folks who are queer to get into detail with what they mean by that at their own pace, if they choose to get into that with you.
Okay, see, that's a good way of, I think, understanding it. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And there was that highly successful TV show, and I must admit, I haven't seen it, even though one of my very favorite ever actresses is in it, Queer as Folk. Have any of you seen it at all, or what was it? First of all, is it as highly acclaimed as it, you know, do you think it should be as highly acclaimed as it is?
I mean, I think that it's an older TV show. I don't think that, I mean, I think it was really, really impactful because it was the first of its kind. And it was something that really started to bring light to the LGBTQ plus community and some of our stories and some of, you know, our identities. And it was something that was more mainstream. So it was a lot broader reach, right?
Okay.
I do think that there are a lot of things that can be problematic about the show, though, that a lot of it has to do with age, a lot of it has to do with representations between intersections of identity. So, like, the intersection of race and LGBTQ, or of ability or disability and LGBTQ, or like all those kinds of things. Yeah. So I do think there's a lot to be improved upon, but I think that it was really a good thing for its time, and it's something that really helped move things forward.
Yeah, I think that anything, anytime you have someone who is brave enough to tackle a subject like that, and not just do it, but do it well, because it was reviewed very, very, very kindly, you know, and so if someone's going to do it and they do it well, I think that's a good thing. So let's see, right off the bat, we've talked about the word queer, and now what does it mean to be transgender? And that's the T in this LGBTQIA+, and that's a mouthful in and of itself. But what does it mean to be transgender? Who wants to tackle that one?
I mean, my goodness, that is going to vary based on every transgender person you talk to, as far as I understand. But I understand it to be, in my own understanding, someone who feels and identifies and is inside different than how they were assigned at birth in any number of ways. And I could be mistaken, but that's my understanding of it, is identifying with a gender that is different than the gender you were assigned at birth by the doctor who birthed you and put, you know, M or F on the certificate, or I guess question mark with intersex. That's a whole thing, but that's, Liz can get more into that. I don't have a lot of intersex experience, but that's, I want to let you know too, Cheryl, I'm not an expert in this stuff. You call us all experts. I am someone trying my best and uses Google a lot and still doesn't know all the definitions of all the genders out there.
But you're an expert on yourself.
Correct, and
And
as
your
we all
own
are.
identity.
And
Yep.
I want to take this moment just because I would hate for us to miss this opportunity. I don't mean to pivot back to pronouns, but I want to let you know, Cheryl, you do understand pronouns more than you think you do because you have pronouns. I believe, at least I've heard folks refer to you as she. Would that be correct?
Well, I'm a female, yeah, sure.
Those are two separate things, but you use she pronouns to the tune of if
I don't know, do I? I don't know.
Well, a test. Okay, so if we said Cheryl ran to go and grab me some water, and we said, Cheryl, he went to go get me water. Would that be correct or incorrect?
Cheryl versus he?
Right.
That would be incorrect. Yeah.
Okay, because your pronouns are she pronouns. So to use he pronouns essentially is like a microaggression towards you, like an act of almost harassment. Like if I would say, no, I see you as a he, I'm going to just use he every time. I don't care what you tell me, blah, blah, blah. Like that's where we get into why pronouns are important, is it doesn't feel good to be called a he when you identify as a she,
Well,
right?
well, that's true, but here's where I get confused, and I know we're jumping way ahead here to the second page, but we'll come back to the transgender thing for sure. So I don't understand why we even need to use the pronouns, why we need to use them under our name, for example. That has never even occurred to me to put any pronouns like she or whatever. I mean, I kind of see why you guys are talking about using pronouns, but
It's tied into the transgender conversation.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to change the subject.
oh no, I didn't think
yeah.
you were,
Sure.
but we did start talking about
Yeah.
pronouns and
And if anybody else wants to jump in, feel free.
Well,
I think that so pronouns are something that is most often tied to your gender in some way. And so for me, since I never felt, similarly to TJ, I never felt like a man, and I never felt like a woman. And so I never felt like either of those things, the pronouns that we typically associate with those sexes, right? So he or she, they just don't feel like they fit for me. Just like he kind of feels kind of weird for you, right? Because it's not who you feel like you are.
well, it's not even just not feeling that it just feels weird. It's just flat out wrong.
Right,
Right.
which
You
is
know,
the same thing
so-
here,
Same thing,
right?
Yeah.
Exact
So
same
that's
thing
the
here.
same thing that I feel like, right? I feel that it's not correct.
So yours,
And so I use they, them,
they, them. So
which has been used singularly for,
this
A
is
long
where I
time.
get confused because I don't see you as two people
right.
or three people or
So-
whatever. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
think
So
of
for
saying
instance,
they.
you use, I'm sure that you use they as a singular sometimes. So we do this all the time. So somebody calls on the phone and you say, oh, who was it? What did they want? You're not referring to multiple people.
Right.
You're using they in the singular because
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't know the gender of the person.
Yeah. Well, even if you do know the gender, you could still say they.
You could still say
could,
they,
yeah.
but
And now that you say that, Eliza, I can recall times when I'm writing a newspaper article or a magazine article or a blog or whatever I'm writing. I will sometimes, you're right, I will use the word they singularly.
and it's been used singularly for hundreds of years. I think actually even a couple thousand years. And so people just don't recognize that they already do that.
Yeah.
And so for me, they feels more comfortable because I don't identify with either the like being really feminine, being really masculine, being a man, or being a woman. And so they just feels more comfortable to me. It feels like people are affirming me. They're seeing me for who I am.
Okay.
And so that makes me feel like euphoria. It makes me feel really good when people use my correct pronouns. Some people, so I don't get dysphoria, which is something that like if, like a really intense like feelings, like really negative feelings, if people use the wrong pronouns for me. So if people use she, I don't prefer it, but it doesn't harm me in any way, right? But there are some people who it is really, really harmful for, and it really is bad for them mentally. And so using the correct pronouns is actually suicide prevention. Because a lot of these people who, when their pronouns aren't respected, they think, oh, people don't see me for who I am, or I don't matter to people because they don't care enough to respect and use my correct pronouns or my correct name. And so then, they turn to other means, like ending their life. So using the correct pronouns is suicide prevention.
That is true.
But we don't always know
Right.
someone's correct pronouns. And so, do these folks not necessarily, now we're getting into a psychiatric realm probably, and none of us are psychiatrists.
I do have a degree in
But-
psychology.
Oh,
Psychology, though. All right, that's good. That works for me. So if we don't know someone's pronoun, here's, because I'm so confused about this whole thing.
Yeah.
thank you for trying.
Which is
You're
okay.
doing- And I'm not ashamed to admit
You're
it.
doing great.
So if I say, hey, Eliza, do you want to go for lunch? You wouldn't be offended by that.
No.
But it would be weird to say, yours are they and them, right?
Right.
So it would be weird for me to say, hey, they, do you want to go for lunch?
Yeah, I don't say, hey, she, do you want to go for lunch?
Yeah.
That would be the same thing.
Yeah, okay.
It's when you would use he or her.
Yeah.
In place
Yeah.
of.
Okay.
So don't
Yeah.
forget that pronouns are a part, if you're looking at it grammatically, they're a part of language where you have a small word that refers to a noun, right?
Yeah, okay.
So it's like I don't identify as a pronoun, but pronouns are what we use so that we don't always have to repeat the person's name,
Okay, all right.
right?
So yeah, you don't identify as a pronoun, you identify with a pronoun.
Okay.
So it would be more like, hey, Liz, I'm going to go grab lunch with Cheryl. She suggested to go to wherever. So then it would be like they suggested to go to wherever instead of she would be the switch off there.
Okay. That part of it does seem weird to me because I'm only one person.
Yeah.
So using the word they in that context seems odd to me. But I think that's my
come with
wordsmithing
practice, yeah.
coming
Yeah.
out because I'm a writer, you
Yeah.
know. So I think that's where that's coming out because I would get dinged.
Yeah.
When we
Yeah.
were back in high school, if I would have written
Right.
something like that, there'd be a red check mark and all
Yeah.
kinds of notes and
Yeah.
what have you.
We learn all kinds of things from society.
Yeah.
We have all kinds of messages, all kinds of things that we learn. And so sometimes we have to recognize that those things aren't as useful as they used to be. And that we need to, modify, change, adapt, right? And so I think that's one of those things that society has always told us, this is how you do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's also
Always.
one of those things that, like, just out of basic respect for folks and stuff like that, and the fact that it's not that difficult to really change that if we try, it just makes sense for us to kind of adapt and change.
Yeah. The thing that I see is that society is so overwhelmed by political correctness. I mean, I find myself in this same situation. I'm sometimes afraid to speak because I don't want to offend someone, and I don't know how to use. Sometimes I don't even know what the politically correct term or word is in any kind of a sentence. In not just dealing with transgender or sexual and gender identification issues. It's just anything. Like with the Black Lives Matter movement. Boy, you got to be so careful. I mean, and so many companies changed their logos and their packaging after that, even though no one was complaining about it, before this George Floyd incident happened. No one was complaining about the Indian maiden on the Land O'Lakes butter or Land O'Lakes cottage cheese, whatever products they had. No one was complaining about that, but from the George Floyd Black Lives Matter movement, everybody, started changing their packaging. And and I didn't understand why. So there's that level of political correctness. And then I remember this one. Someone said, well, you know, the word chief shouldn't be used either because that refers back to like an Indian chief. And they actually wanted to change the word, this was down south, they actually wanted to change the title of their police chief. And that too, now that just seemed to me, and I'm just going to be totally honest, that seemed ridiculous to me. You know, we still have to have, you know, we're not talking about, you know, too many chiefs, not enough Indians. We're not talking about that. Somebody has to be in charge. Somebody has to be a leader. And I don't see anything wrong with using the word chief, as long as it's being used in a proper or respectful manner. I don't see why we have to jump through all these other hoops to do all this other stuff. And so I think that people, I know for myself, I feel very overwhelmed by trying to always be politically correct. And sometimes I just think, oh, I'd rather just not even talk because I'm going to get myself in trouble somewhere along the way, even if I don't mean to. Because I never try to be mean-spirited. I always try and be, you know, polite and accepting, no matter what anyone's situation is. But I'm always afraid of, you know, stepping on somebody's toes or hurting their feelings in some way. And so sometimes it's just easier not to talk. And so now, and then we have to now think about people's pronouns too. And it gets, some people may think, well, it's just laziness. I just think it just is overwhelming. It tires people out, you know?
And part of me thinks, I mean, a couple of things I'm thinking here. I mean, one thing is that if there's something that's not from your culture, it's from another person's culture, and it's being, the image is being used or the words are being used. If you're not from that culture, of course you're not bothered by that. And so you say, well, nobody cared about that. And so, but if you are from that culture, it may actually really bother you. But if you are from a culture that has not been allowed to speak, then you're not going to be necessarily raising your voice.
Yeah.
And so, but what I think, and you also always are talking about sort of political correctness, I kind of think we want to put that term aside because it's not that, you know, we're trying to follow these really strict rules that we don't understand and we actually think they're not really a good thing, and so we're going to be slapped on the wrist if we don't do them right, right?
Yeah.
I think what we have to remember is go back to your heart, because you said you're a really good person. And we're trying to create a community where we really are just being really good to each other. And so if somebody needs, let's say Eliza really, really needs, I don't know, pencils to survive in the day.
Okay.
And, you know, I really don't. I really prefer pens.
Me too.
You know what I mean? But, you know, I'm going to make sure that when Eliza comes to the resource center that I have pencils there. Because, you know, I respect Eliza, and I think Eliza should have pencils.
And freshly sharpened ones at that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so when we're talking about these kind of things, I'm trying to create on our campus a community where we're working together and we're calling each other in, because we really want to create this community where we actually do respect everybody and we actually listen to everybody's voice. I'm trying to get rid of this culture where we call people out because they aren't doing something the way we want them to do it.
Now explain that, because I'm not sure I
So
think
what-
I understand what you mean, but I'm not entirely certain.
So what I mean is by calling somebody out is like if somebody uses the wrong pronoun for a person, that you just say, no, you don't use that, it's this. Because that's going to make that person feel almost attacked by that, right? And then they're not even going to want to try.
Like they don't want to talk.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's kind of how I feel at
Yeah.
times.
But if somebody instead say something sort of, oh, actually they use this pronoun, and we're all working together, and I mess up too. So if I mess up, can you please help me remember? And I'm going to help you remember.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're working together as a community to do this.
And on that note, I remember the very first show that you were on, and we were talking about transgender issues and people and what have you. And I mistakenly referred to it as I referred to those folks as transgendered. Remember that? Do you remember that? And you corrected me. Corrected me on air. For some people that might be embarrassing. It wasn't to me. I made, it was just, I didn't intentionally misuse the word and you politely corrected me. And you know what? I have every time that I think now or write the word transgender, I think of you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think of you a lot. I'll tell you that, Liz, because, that sticks in my brain.
Yeah.
And yet I didn't feel attacked by you when you corrected me. You did it in a very kind, very professional way, and I appreciated that. And so I didn't feel attacked, and you didn't feel like I was just being kind of a jerk for using the word that I had. And all's good. All's good.
Yep.
And so I guess that's maybe the best way that we as a society should appreciate it and handle things. Unfortunately, some people get too upset too quickly about things, and then we have gunfire and we have other types of violence, and that doesn't help anybody. That helps no one.
But I'd like to suggest that it's not that they have done it too quickly, because if anything reaches that kind of a level, it means that they've been dealing with this for years, a long time, and these things are building up. And so I will never advocate violence, but I do understand that point of it's too much.
And we need to understand transgender people are far more likely to be victims of violence than to be perpetrators of violence. But I get what you're saying with, I've been met with that energy, and I apologize if I ever sent that energy your way. I very well might have. I've done it before where I've just been burnt out and tired of being the Google for everyone. And I love it on some days, but every once in a while you have a moment and you're like, why can't I just, like you said, why can't I just be affirmed? Why can't other people just see me like I feel like I am? Why can't, and I'll tell you, the suicidal ideations I had went away very soon after I was able to find the language that fit how I felt inside my entire life. My entire life. I had people telling me I was going in the wrong bathroom regardless of the bathroom. Then what am I supposed to do? And you just get, and my entire life I've heard she pronouns and felt inside, I know they're not talking about me, but I know they are talking about me, but and there's this whole internal, how do you not feel like just ending it all when all you can think of is, wow, I really am an alien here. I really don't feel like anybody knows what I'm going through. Until I found communities that did, and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm not the only alien. I'm not the only one. And I think that was just a word I used to myself in my own head. I'm not trying to, anyway.
No, and to your point, you never made me feel uncomfortable. Or
I'm not the best with teaching moments, and I'm learning from Liz how to be a better person to help teach people. I apologize, but I have noticed like I've been the person in the room who is the only one who's put their pronouns on the screen, and I've started doing that as soon as I realized. I learned about pronouns a couple years ago, pretty much when everybody else did, and I was also when the suicidal ideation stopped. But that was also a time when I was like, and here's the thing, you, Cheryl, you can be an advocate for transgender rights and just gender equality by putting your own pronouns as a cis woman, which I understand you to be, and you've told us that you identify as
a what woman?
Cis meaning not trans or not. You identify with the gender you were born as, assigned at birth. Excuse me.
So, how are you spelling that?
It's just CIS.
CIS.
So cis people, in my understanding, are folks who identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth. So you would be a cis person,
so
in
I'm
my
a cis
understanding.
Woman.
So look at that, you learned, yes.
It's cisgender.
Cisgendered.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I'm cisgendered
cisgender.
or cisgender.
Cisgender.
Okay.
And then it's shortened to cis, just like transgender is shortened to trans.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was saying, Cheryl, like as someone who, was assigned female at birth and still identifies as a female today and still uses she/her pronouns, you can be that advocate and that, push for positive change in the right direction by putting your own pronouns in your bio for future interviews, and what that will show.
Okay, now see, you're going to embarrass me into doing this.
No,
No, I know that you're not. I know.
No, but I'm saying
I'm trying to make
what that,
light of this.
What that would be
that,
is just a way,
because people are going to be looking now.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and also I want to put your mind
Okay.
at ease with not knowing what
She
to do.
and her.
You can
Okay.
ask. I have friends who I don't know. They've told me their gender identity. I don't remember it. I'm very blessed to have a number of friends, and I try my best to remember it for every single one of them. But there's like a friend today. I was going to message them something, and I was like, God, am I going to ask them what their pronouns are again? But then I thought, I'd rather ask than get it wrong. And I would just say, hey, friend, forgive me, I know you've mentioned it. What are your pronouns again? And I'm sure they're going to be more thrilled to answer that question than they are going to be to get misgendered by someone who's close to them.
Although if you were to ask someone on the street of that kind of question, they would be looking at you like, what in God's name are you talking about?
I would reframe that and say you will learn very quickly if they care about that question. Not everybody does, but the people who do, it is suicide prevention. And it is you saying, hey, person on the street that I haven't met, I'm not going to assume that I know who you are inside by what I see on the outside. So I'm going to ask you to tell me who you are because no one knows who you are better than you. And I respect you.
Isn't really all that important, though, I guess, that we know how they identify themselves? Can't we just, I feel like Rodney King now, but, can't we all just get along by being kind to one another and
It
treating
is a
each
form
other?
of kindness. That is the
I
thing,
know,
though.
but it adds to, in my mind, it
Sure.
adds another level or another layer of potential confusion, because I think as a society we've got so many different labels, and sometimes people just say, man, all these labels, I just feel like we've got labels for this, that, and the other, and there's so much to think about. And so I think it's fair, it may not be right, but I think it's fair to say that some people feel very overwhelmed by
Sure.
us having so many different labels. And see, now I'm still trying to grasp this, so I want to make sure of what I am. My pronouns are she and her. Do I have any others?
That
That's-
is
Only
those are
if
the
you
only-
do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So she and her, and I am a cis, CIS hyphen,
No hyphen.
no hyphen.
No hyphen.
Okay. No
Oh,
hyphen.
one word.
Just one word.
I'm a cis transgender.
No,
No,
cisgender.
cisgender.
Oh, okay. All right.
Cisgender.
See, now I'm glad I asked, because if I told someone this, I'd really be messing them up. So,
True.
These conversations are important, though.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
so
glad we're having them.
cisgender
Yes.
Yeah.
or cis woman,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
cisgender is the
So I
appropriate
don't know if this is helpful for you, but etymology is helpful for me. So learning about the roots of the words. So cis means same. So it means you were born, the doctor assigned you a sex at birth, your sex aligns with your gender. So you were born female and you identify as a woman.
Okay.
Or you are born male and you identify as a man. And then transgender, trans means to cross, right? So it means that somehow that's not lining up. So you were assigned female at birth, maybe. Like I was assigned female at birth, but I don't feel like a woman, right? So then I follow under the transgender umbrella, right? So because I'm crossing in some way.
But well, maybe I'm assuming here and I shouldn't. You've not had any kind of sex reassignment.
You don't need to.
So we got to go back, because you started this conversation by asking what it means to be transgender.
Yes.
And we
So
never got to answer
Let's go
that.
back to that, yeah.
And I think the one thing that people really have to understand is that sex refers to our bodies. Gender is something that happens in the brain, and it is not the same as sex. even though we've been taught they're exactly the same thing. And so we're taught that all males are men, all females are women. Therefore, those words can be used interchangeably, and it's fine. Like you fill out a form and ask you for your gender, and it gives you the words male and female, which are actually words that describe what your sex is, what's happening with your body. So if we can understand that gender is absolutely different than sex, we can understand that there are actually more than two genders in the world.
And yet on things like job applications or whatever, you won't see the word gender. You'll see the word sex and then two, choices,
Actually,
male or female.
Other way around, you see the word gender and the
I've
two
not-
choices.
yeah,
male.
I've not
I've seen
seen
it both
that.
ways.
You've seen
and
sex?
depending
I
on the
haven't
place,
seen that at
yeah.
all. But I don't fill out that many job applications.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in fact, I did just fill one out not too long ago, and it said sex,
And what were your
And
options, male and female?
male and female,
Well, that's good, because then
and
they're
that
actually
was-
asking
and
about
that was
that.
it.
Yeah.
But I'll just share a little joke with you, kind of poking fun of myself here. When we started out this conversation, and you said that the I in LBGTQIA plus was for intersex, like a goof, I wrote down intersex like you've got two streets intersecting.
Oh.
And
Yes.
I finally caught on
Yes.
during the conversation that it's intersex, S-E-X.
Yep. Yep.
So I had it. That's why that's crossed out there, because I goofed up.
Yes.
Okay.
So
That's okay.
anyway,
because there's actually 3 sex categories, right? So we have the 2 that are most commonly known. There's male and female, but there are some folks whose biology doesn't align necessarily in the way that we would see just female or just male, and so those folks are intersex.
okay, all right. Okay, well, let's talk about what transgender is. We kind of got a general idea, but let's talk about how that. TJ, you brought up before about bathrooms, and bathrooms can be a tricky thing for transgender folks. It can be a tricky thing in general. So why are bathrooms tricky for you? Let me ask you that, TJ.
So now that I'm 6'1" and just carry myself differently than
Yeah,
I did
you're
when I was
tall.
a child,
You're tall.
most folks leave me alone when I use the bathroom of my choosing, and they're wise to do so. As you would be wise to leave everyone alone when they're using the bathroom of their choosing, because again, I know which bathroom I chose. I chose it intentionally, and that's the bathroom best suited to
And may
who
I
I
ask
am.
what bathroom it is?
For me, well, I mean, I almost don't want to answer that question because
Okay,
it almost
that's
doesn't
fine.
matter. But that's kind of to the point of it's everybody's going to feel different, personally sharing different things. And honestly, it changes for me from day to day which one I feel safer in and more comfortable in. So I'm a big fan of the bathrooms that have a toilet on the door, and just show me that there's a toilet there, because that, or show us that there's a urinal in there if there's one, because then folks who want to use that can use it. That's really my opinion on bathrooms. But
Yeah.
I do have a couple of things I want to say. I'm not an expert in transgender, but I did learn a lot about it when I was asking a lot of similar questions that you are asking now. Things to the tune of, it's a common misconception that transgender means one who has gender reassignment surgery, and that is not correct, in my understanding from talking to transgender people.
Yeah, yeah.
So again, and part of the way to know that we know who someone is again just asking them. So if you ask someone that you think looks like a traditional woman and they tell you they're a man or a transgender man, they are a man. And a transgender man, by the way, is a man. Some men have penises, some men have vaginas. That is how gender works. Is again, it's the body doesn't always match the brain, and the brain of folks are women sometimes in bodies that don't look like traditional women.
Okay.
Now, some transgender folks stop there and they don't get surgery, and some of them get, partial surgery or this or that, or there's about 7 billion different ways to have a gender right now, and that's because there's 7 billion different people on the world, right now.
Yeah.
And I just want us to kind of, at the end of the day, realize that, even if you've learned a little bit about transgender, we've all learned a little, but every transgender person is going to be different and going to have different experiences and going to define transgender differently. But the one common core thing that helps me is the understanding that it's someone who identifies differently than the gender they were assigned by the doctor and that is, on their driver's license, etc.
Right.
And differently could mean numerous things, and that is constantly changing.
And yet, when we think about bathrooms, I try to think about everybody. And so while walking into a man's bathroom on Tuesday might feel good for you, TJ, it might make, if the bathroom's busy, or even if they've just got one or two men in there, it might make them uncomfortable because they would see you as a woman, and whether that's right or wrong or indifferent, that's how they perceive you. And so they may become uncomfortable with a woman in their bathroom. Do you see what I mean?
And they can live with that uncomfortableness, and they can go home and think about why they were uncomfortable, and they can also read about trans people and recognize that they exist and that they also have to pee sometimes.
But is it fair to only think that they should think about it and they should deal with it?
Is it is it also though fair for the person who's trying to use the correct bathroom for them to have to deal with what they deal with? And I think
that's why I think this is a very confusing, challenging issue.
And I just want to say also that with the bathroom issue, there's a lot of safety issues going on. So, for instance, I know a lot of trans folks that pass really well. So that means that you, talking to them, looking at them, you wouldn't know that they were assigned a different sex at birth than how they identify now.
Right.
And so do you want somebody that looks like a man going into a woman's bathroom when they identify as being a man either? Like, you know what I mean? That might make... That might also make people feel uncomfortable, but it's also a safety thing. So, like, I was born, I was assigned female at birth, and I do use women's restrooms because they feel safer for me. But just because of how I present myself, I've often been told that I was in the wrong bathroom, and I've often been harassed for being told I was in the wrong bathroom.
By being in the women's bathroom?
By being in the women's bathroom. Because people will perceive me as maybe not necessarily a woman, just based on my appearance. I'm a little more femme right now, but sometimes I dress a little more masculinely. And so, can we really tell for anybody? You know what I mean? We're all making assumptions at that point, and can't we just be like, you know what? People are in here to use the bathroom and leave.
Yeah.
They don't really care about anything else.
But when men are using urinals, that's a whole different thing, and that's why I would not do well as a man, because I want to be in a stall where I can close the door no matter what I'm doing in there. You know?
Yeah.
I want to say I haven't lived a life of a man, so I don't want to speak from my own experience, but having talked to men and listened to their experience, many of them do sit down in stalls and pee in the toilet with
That's
a penis.
good to know.
And I want to say that out loud because I didn't know that. And also I'm sure there's men out there who don't know that and who feel, and there's also probably trans men out there who don't have a penis and don't want a penis, but feel like they have to, or they're not man enough if they don't use a urinal. You are a man if you are a man and you sit and use the toilet. I mean, it sounds silly to say that, but these things need to be said. And I got to be mindful of our time here. They just gave me the 10-minute, and I can't even believe that we're down to 10 minutes.
Right? It's gone so quickly.
I know.
I just want to say that, I think that you're doing a really great job, and it's clear that you're learning things and you're taking that into consideration. Which
I'm
is,
trying.
I think, you are. You're doing great.
There's a lot to learn.
You're using transgender, which you learned from Liz a long time ago. You switched your terminology. Originally, when you were talking about LGBT, you called it transsexual.
I picked up on it really fast. She's a very good instructor.
A is a really good instructor. And so I just want to say that, that's really, for us in the community, that's what we're looking for. Exactly. We're not looking for people to be experts.
I just misgendered Liz. I'm a human being. I make mistakes.
We all make mistakes. Even those of us who do this work make mistakes all the time.
I'm a gender advocate. I just made a mistake. Exactly.
And so I think don't be afraid to make mistakes. And don't be afraid to also own up when you make mistakes and try and correct yourself. I think there's a really great Maya Angelou quote that's, when you know better, do better. So you don't always know better, but when you learn and now you know better, do better. And I think that that's just a really important thing to bring to this conversation.
Yeah, it's
Because a lot of us, I'm super excited when anybody tries, and I see that you're trying and you're learning and you're really trying to
you can
understand.
only see the wheels turning.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like, as somebody to be an ally for our community and to, anything, I think that that's the greatest thing.
It used to be when I, and I'm dating myself here for sure, but when I first came out, it was probably 78 or 79. You guys may not have even been born yet. I'm sure you were, but I'm looking at these two. And I was considered pretty much not an expert per se, but I mean, I headed up a gay and lesbian discussion group and support group. And, that, and I was involved with, what was it called on campus? I wasn't a student, but I think it was called the 10% Society or something like that. And so when I first moved back here in 93, I joined that group, and I felt very old because they were all students and I was not,
Right.
But so I was very knowledgeable about all these things back then, and now here I am at age 65, and I'm thinking, I'm so confused.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Well, I know it's okay, but
And-
it's just I've never felt such confusion about gender or sex or even race these days can be a confusing issue. But you're right, ladies. See, now I just did it again.
See,
Folks, you
People.
folks.
Perfect.
I'm trying, and I guess that's
doing
all
great.
anyone
You're
can
doing
ask
excellent.
of
You're doing
anybody.
awesome.
But bathrooms is a big issue, and I think that it would be really nice if we could just have 3 different kinds of bathrooms: his, hers, and theirs. If you want to use a pronoun or whatever. If folks are comfortable with going into a bathroom that's unisex or co-sex, then fine, let them go in there. I used a men's bathroom one time, and I was at a game, and I just had to go, and that line for the women's bathroom was too damn long.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I
Right.
can't wait. There's going to be a mess on the floor.
Right.
I hightailed it into the men's John, and I went into a stall, and I did what I needed to do. Frankly, I didn't care how anybody looked at me because I had one thing on my mind, and that was it.
And that's
And
what
preventing,
everybody has.
preventing an
That's the
accident.
same.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
And
You
I
know.
think it might be interesting. What if we had all the restrooms were like all gender restrooms, and we just had stalls. They were all stalls,
And that would be
floor
fine,
floor
too.
to ceiling
Exactly.
stalls. Like I think this would solve all the
would.
problems.
Or I was vacationing in Maine, and they have a law that every single stall bathroom, you don't call them men's, women's, they're just restrooms. And anybody would use them.
well, I think that's a good idea.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
I don't know, it seems like things happen on the coasts and then they slowly migrate to the middle part of the country. At some point, we may see something like that.
Yeah.
And that would be great. I don't know how long it might take to see that, though.
That's right, we'll still be alive.
Yeah. So I'm just looking here. The one thing that we do need to talk about very quickly, because time's running out, is the binary and non-binary terms. I'm totally at a loss with that. I don't know what any of that means, and that's actually how this all started
Yeah.
with you and I, was binary and non-binary, and I'm like, what?
Sure.
You want to start?
I'll make it as quick as I can. I understand transgender, I see it as a big umbrella, and I see non-binary as a little umbrella under the big umbrella, and underneath this little umbrella of non-binary are a number of different folks, gender queer, gender non-conforming, words that I don't even know of yet, and I'm still learning, But essentially non-binary, they are under the transgender umbrella in that they don't identify with the gender they were assigned at birth. And, I'm one of those folks. I identify as trans non-binary. And then non-binary means again, yes, anything that is, it's an infinite term in my opinion. It can be literally anything other than the gender you were assigned at birth, and there's a lot there.
So some trans people are binary. So
Right.
what that means is, like, there are some people who they're assigned female at birth, they identify as a man, and so they're still a binary gender. Man or woman are the binary genders.
Yep.
So they
Okay,
still
yeah.
identify as a binary gender,
Right.
even though they're transgender. So non-binary people don't associate with either man or woman in some way. So I identify as non-binary. I don't feel like I'm a man. I don't feel like I'm a woman. I never have felt like I was, right? And so I don't identify within the binary of just man or just woman. I identify outside of that, so non-binary.
And I have to complicate things just because I love the word queer. I identify as gender queer, and that's an identity under that non-binary umbrella. But again, as TJ said, there are a lot of identities under that non-binary.
All right, what am I? I know that sounds stupid, but
cisgender.
what am I?
You're cisgender.
And you're a woman, so you're a binary woman.
I'm binary.
You're
Okay,
you
all right,
you have
I'm
a binary gender.
See, I got to write down what I
That's
am
okay.
because this is so confusing.
It's okay.
That's okay.
And I'm binary because why? Help me understand this again.
So binary means two,
okay.
right? And there are a lot of binaries that we have in society, in the world. For some reason, people think it's easier to think in binaries, that you're either in this category or this category.
Dog person or cat person.
But
Hot, cold.
and the reality is, human beings are complicated,
Yeah.
and there's no way we can fit into two categories. But when it comes to gender, the two binary terms that we've used is man and woman.
Right, right.
And so that is why you're a binary woman, because you're a cisgender woman who identifies as both a woman and female.
And that makes me binary.
The gender woman,
That
you
makes me
use
binary.
You're
well,
one of- you're
you
one of those
use
two
the
binary
the
categories.
binary category woman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
That's
out
all right.
of the two gender categories, man and woman, I don't identify with either.
Yeah. None of us do.
Right. None of the
Hence non-binary.
Yeah.
Not within the two
Yeah.
that
So,
society
right, yeah, we
assigned
don't-
to us.
Now you see, I'm the queer person here.
Nice. Nicely done.
very good.
You got it. You're a pro.
And we're down to about 2 minutes, so I don't know if there's anything else that we can wrap up really quickly. One thing I do want to find out, are you guys doing something called a drag bunch this summer?
We did a drag. We actually did drag bingo last weekend.
Oh,
And it was actually really fun. It was a fundraiser for our Pride Scholarship for students,
okay.
and we actually raised $1,000.
Wow, that's great. How many people attended? Do
I-
you have any idea?
I was there. I don't know how many were us. Maybe 30 of us were there,
That's great.
and so it actually went
Awesome.
really well.
Yeah, very good.
It went
Okay.
really well. But we are going to have we're calling it a Pride Gala in October.
Okay.
If anybody's ever heard of our Harvey Milk Scholarship Dinner, we're changing the name of the scholarship and the name of the celebration.
Okay.
And so the new interim director at the Resource Center, Maddie Wiles, is going to be heading that up.
How do you spell Maddie?
Maddie.
Okay. And the last name is
Wiles, Wiles.
W-I-L-E-S. If you can get me her number and so
Yes.
forth, I'd like to have it in my
Definitely.
files, because this topic will come up again and again and again. So, ladies, thank you so very much. I've got less than a minute.
Folks,
Did you want to say something really, really fast?
The Hope Fridge thing.
Oh, the Oshkosh Pride coming
Yeah.
up at this June 26th in South Park from 2 to 8 p.m. Performers and just a positive environment to connect folks with resources, and everybody's
food.
welcome.
And
free
it
food,
benefits,
free drinks.
It benefits Hope Fridge.
It's an unofficial fundraiser. There'll be buckets
Okay.
on the tables, but it's really just free for the community.
All right, great. Very good. All right, we're out of time. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
wonderful retirement, because
Cheryl.
this will be your last time on the show in this capacity, but
Yes,
you're
it
going to
will.
be doing something else, and we're going to have you back.
Thank you.
So thanks again to all of you.
Thank you,
And
Cheryl.
Thank
thanks
you.
to my crew, and thanks to you folks, whether you're at home listening on the radio or watching us on television. We'll see you next time. And next time probably won't be this confusing, but we'll see. You never know what I'm going to do. So anyway, thanks so much. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got All Right on Oshkosh.